Okay, today we're going to look at solving quadratic equations, but instead of using factoring to solve them, we're going to look at using a quadratic formula. So the formula works for any equation as long as it's in standard form. So standard form is when the equation is some number x squared plus something x plus something equals 0. So we want the a, b, and c numbers. And all we have to do is use those numbers and plug them into this formula. And then simplify the formula, and that'll give us our two answers. So let's do this first example. You can see we have x squared plus 5x plus 6. That means our a will be 1, right? There's nothing in front of the x squared, but we can always put a 1 there. Our b will be 5, and our c is 6. So all we have to do is plug all of those things into our formula. So you have minus b, so minus 5, plus or minus b squared, so that's 5 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 6 divided by 2 times 1. That's it. So just plug all those in, solve it on your calculator. So 5 squared is 25, minus 6 times 4 times 1 would be 24. 25 minus 24 is 1. So we have minus 5 plus or minus square root of 1 over 2. The plus or minus just means we got to do both. So our two answers in this case, square root of 1 is 1. So our two answers in this case will be minus 5 plus 1 divided by 2 and minus 5 minus 1 divided by 2. So when you do that on your calculator or in your head, minus 5 plus 1 is negative 4 divided by 2 will be negative 2. So minus 5 plus 1 divided by 2, when you simplify that, you get negative 2. Minus 5 minus 1 divided by 2, simplify that, you get negative 3. So that is our two answers, negative 2 and negative 3. Okay, let's look at this one. So this one's, we got a number in front, we got our 2 in front. So when we were factoring, remember we wanted to divide by that 2. When we use the formula, it doesn't matter if that 2 is there or not. So that's one advantage of the formula, is you can just plug it in whatever the numbers are. So let's use the formula in this case. So minus b would be negative 12, plus or minus 12 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 18. And we're going to divide that by 2 times 2. Okay, so we're going to simplify all of this. So that's 12 squared is 144. 4 times 2 is 8 times 18. Is 144 again, and we're dividing by 2 times 2 is 4. So in this case, you can see our square root ends up being 0. And the square root of 0 is 0, so basically all that part goes away, so we just get minus 12 divided by 4, which is negative 3. So in this case, our square root is a 0 answer, which means we're only going to get one solution. If we go back to the last one, where square root was equal to 1, so we got a positive square root. That meant we got two different answers. So the formula will tell you whether you have two answers, one answer, or the next example we're going to look at is one where we get no answers. So that's going to happen when we have something like this. So if we use our formula, I'll rewrite the formula here again. Okay, so when we plug it into our formula, we'll have minus b. So b in this case is negative 1, so minus of negative 1 will be plus 1. And when we square root it, we get minus 1 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 3, divided by 2 times 2. So when you plug all that in your formula this time, we get 1 minus 24 over 4. So when we simplify it, we get 1 plus or minus square root of 23. And square root of 23, negative 23, square root of negative 23 doesn't work. You can't square root of negative number. So that means, in this case, because we can't do a square root, we get no solutions. So if you look at the last three examples, we had the first one, we had a positive square root. The second one, our square root was equal to 0. And the last one, now we get a negative square root. So that is the three possibilities you could always get, and depending on what you get, that'll tell you how many solutions you have. So positive square root gives you 2 solutions, A 0 square root gives you one solution, and a negative square root doesn't work, so we get 0 solutions for that. Okay, so just that number under the square root, the b squared minus 4ac, we call that the discriminant. So all you have to do is figure out what that number is under the square root, and once you know that, you can then determine how many solutions it has based on whether it's positive, a negative, or equal to 0. Okay, and let's do one more example. So in a lot of cases, when we factored, remember we could get questions that just didn't factor. Now we're going to look at questions where you might not be able to factor them, but the formula will still work. So in this case, our formula would be negative b, so plus 4. Then it's going to be negative 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2 divided by 2 times 3. So in this case, when we square root, we get 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 3 is 12, negative 12 times 2 will be plus 24. So we will have square root of 40 over 6, and square root of 40 doesn't work, right? It works out to a decimal. It works out as a decimal, so we can just leave it. We don't need to write the decimal answer. You can just write it as 4 plus root 40 divided by 6, and your second answer would be 4 minus root 40 divided by 6. And you can just leave them like that. If for whatever reason you wanted to get the actual answer, you would just type it in 4 plus root 40 divided by 6, and that gives us an answer approximately 1.72. And we could go 4 minus root 40 divided by 6, and that gives us an answer of negative 0.39 approximately. Okay, so either leave it as a square root, or you can simplify it down to a decimal. And later on we're going to figure out how to simplify those square roots, but for now that'll be it. So there's the quadratic formula.